It started with a sneeze. Not a literal one. Soryn Vell's synthetic organic body didn't do mucus, but a data sneeze, a hiccup in an archival subroutine during a routine sweep for anti-Federation sentiment in old war footage. 1 second, the archive was happily chugging through centuries of dusty military propaganda, and the next, it spat out a blinking red file labeled Treaty Nullification Contingency Project Spectral. That was not normal, and definitely not part of the official Cold War records. Soryn had seen plenty of weird in her years as a Federation intelligence agent. Sentient mold uprisings, interspecies gambling rings run out of hollow asteroids, even the time a Martari diplomat got caught smuggling live squirrels as emotional armor. But this, a mislabeled Cold War file wrapped in encryption protocols dating back to the first contact war with Earth, that was bureaucratic gold, or nuclear fallout, depending on what it meant. Curious and, let's be honest, bored, Soryn flagged the file for investigation. She didn't open it, not immediately. That would have been reckless. Instead, she did what all good intel agents do. She requested official clearance and prepped her favorite tea-like nutrient paste. Within 12 seconds, her console chirped back. Access denied. Class Omega Lockdown. Omega Lockdown was a special kind of no, the kind of no reserved for war crimes, mass extinctions, or files so politically radioactive they could melt whole alliances. Soryn blinked. Her artificial cornea adjusted slightly. Her organic heart fluttered in synthetic curiosity. What could possibly be that sensitive after all these years? Of course, that meant she had to see it. Now, Soryn wasn't a rogue agent. Not officially. She followed protocols creatively. She'd once described her espionage style as morally optimized chaos wrapped in administrative politeness. So she called in an old favor with a Skrell archivist she once saved from a sentient printer infestation. With some clever code sculpting and a lot of passive-aggressive diplomacy, she got a mirror copy of the file. Inside one was silence. No visuals, no narration, just a series of transcribed meetings. Federation Council, high level, pre-war, and the words, they were chilling. A unified federation cannot emerge without a defining enemy, followed by humanity is untested, aggressive, and narratively perfect. And finally, initiate Operation Genesis. Soryn stared. No blinking, no breath, just thousands of lines of dialogue suggesting the entire First Contact War, the one that killed billions, reshaped the quadrant, and nearly annihilated Earth, wasn't a tragic misunderstanding. It was scripted, manufactured, on purpose. She leaned back in her neural cradle, trying to ignore the strange warmth building behind her ear. Not emotion, not yet, just the sensation of falling, slowly, into a pit lined with too many questions and not enough exits. Because if this was true, then the war wasn't humanity's fault. And worse, they might have known it all along and said nothing. Welcome to the glitch. Welcome to the truth no one wants found. Welcome to Operation Genesis. You know a file's going to be juicy when opening it requires codes that haven't been used since the Skrellian civil ice purge. A political meltdown so bad it froze half their oceans and turned their parliament into an aquarium. But Soryn Vell had those override codes, because Soryn collected secrets like other people collected commemorative spoons, and she'd once helped a Skrellian chancellor fake his own retirement by turning him into a seaweed farmer. Long story. The point is, she got in, and what she found was a time-stamped recording. Over 70 cycles old. The kind of grainy, flickering footage that smells of conspiracy even when it's digital. A council chamber, tiered seats, Federation banners still featuring the original logo before they swapped it out for the less colonial empire aesthetic. And seated at the high dais, every major species top brass, including a then-young Chancellor Darash, looking slightly less like a taxidermied eel. The conversation was already mid-flow. If we don't act now, the window will close. The humans are chaotic, yes, but containable if we strike preemptively and control the narrative. A pause, then another voice. Dry, insectoid, unnervingly calm. A ghoul diplomat. Do we all agree that a fabricated provocation will galvanize unification better than another trade war? Murmurs, nods. One burly reptilian military chief tapped his claw against the table and grunted, "We need an enemy, not a policy debate. The people respond to fear, not spreadsheets." Soryn's artificial pupils narrowed. She fast scanned the transcript overlay. Keywords: Operation Genesis, manufactured incursion, controlled loss, human retaliation protocol. Her stomach, not technically organic but close enough, curled into a knot of coiled static. They'd planned it. The entire First Contact War was a false flag. The logic? Classic power play. The Federation back then was a patchwork of squabbling species with more grudges than planets. Dozens of near secessions, trade sabotage, border skirmishes over the ownership of moon-shaped gas. But nothing, absolutely nothing, unites fractured civilizations like a terrifying common enemy. And humanity? Oh, they were perfect. An unpredictable upstart species, brimming with nuclear leftovers, sarcastic humor, and a suspicious amount of homemade explosives. They were still arguing about whether Pluto was a planet while building exosuits out of tractor parts. And worst of all, they didn't fear the Federation. They mocked it, loudly, with memes. So the plan was simple. Stage an incursion, make it look like humanity fired first, trigger an overwhelming response, and rally the factions under one banner. Casualties? Regrettable? Collateral optics? Manageable. Long-term stability? Priceless, said one of the council members, in a voice that made Soryn want to throw a chair across the room. She paused the recording. Her fingers trembled, which was weird because her fingers weren't supposed to do that. But here she was, Federation intelligence agent Soryn Vell, certified by 14 departments and a half-cybernetic nervous system, physically shaking from the implications. If this ever got out, it would rip the Federation apart. But what haunted her most wasn't just the deception. It was the possibility that humans knew and never told anyone. Because sometimes silence isn't ignorance. It's strategy. If you've ever tried to decode ancient Terran subtext, congratulations. You're either already mad or soon to be. Because humans don't just speak in riddles, they layer them. Sarcasm on top of irony, on top of obscure movie references from civilizations long dead. Half of their diplomacy reads like a joke no one explains, and everyone laughs it anyway. Soryn Vell knew this going in. What she didn't expect was how intentional it all seemed. She began cross-referencing the old Federation footage with public human broadcasts. UN declarations, peace summit footage, even cultural interviews with Terran ambassadors. And at first, it all looked like regular chaos. Earth flags behind slightly disheveled diplomats, smug smiles, coffee cups balanced on data tables, casual digs at galactic bureaucracy. But then, patterns. Certain phrases kept repeating across decades. We forgive fast, but we remember forever. History is written by survivors. You can't fake trust unless you're really good at poker. Poker. That strange Earth game where lying is not just allowed, it's strategic. Soryn ran a linguistic filter across hundreds of their transmissions and uncovered embedded analog patterns that aligned with 70-cycle-old Federation intel codes. She didn't just find echoes. She found mirrors, gestures at key moments, nods in response to Federation buzzwords, pauses after certain trigger phrases, like they were signaling, but not to their own people, to the Federation. A quiet wink every time the old myth was reinforced. And then came the kicker. A Terran ambassador in a Peace Council summit, cycle 3148, after a particularly heated debate over border weaponization. The Skrellian diplomat had accused humanity of psychological intimidation through unpredictable culture. The human had smiled, soft, charming, and said, "Unpredictability is our greatest asset. We learned that from you." Everyone had laughed, but Soryn didn't. Because when that ambassador said, "We learned that from you," he tapped his fingers, rhythmically, against the table in a sequence known only to Federation Black Ops. Signal for acknowledged deception. They knew. They'd always known. And what's worse, they'd played along. Not out of weakness, not out of fear, but because humans understood something the Federation never did. The power of narrative. They became the monster under the bed because it kept the monsters in the hall from tearing each other apart. By letting the galaxy believe they were barely restrained chaos in denim jackets, Earth got exactly what it needed. Distance, autonomy, respect. They played the villain in a galactic mythos to maintain peace. They leaned into the shadows because from there, you can see everything. Soryn leaned back, mind spinning. Humanity had turned galactic paranoia into a shield. They hadn't just survived the false flag, they'd weaponized it. Not with bombs or fleets, with winks, with rumors, with timing. And now Soryn wasn't sure what scared her more, that she had uncovered the truth, or that the humans had let her. Dead moons are supposed to stay dead, especially the ones labeled classified decommissioned, which in Federation terms means do not touch unless you want your atoms politely rearranged. But Agent Soryn Vell wasn't in the mood for permission. The exo-moon, codenamed Orchid Black, used to house the Federation's deep memory intelligence. Back when secrets were stored in vaults rather than grown in neural moss and sung into quantum air. Now it was little more than a frozen husk, cracked by time, orbiting a planet no one bothered to name. But someone had buried something there. Something the Federation didn't want found. Navigating the collapsed data tunnels and broken cortical pillars, Soryn finally located the vault's central node, a memory core preserved beneath crystallized nitrogen. It hummed softly, like an old soldier with a story it swore never to tell. She cracked it open. No defenses, no encryption that hadn't rotted through. Just files, dozens, hundreds, flagged and stamped with ancient codes, Federation interception logs, Skrell intel analysis, and then she saw it. A folder labeled, confirmed compromise. Terran signals inside were human transmissions, intercepted mid-war. Not battlefield chatter or ambassador calls. These were internal. Hidden communications bounced between Terran black sites, and every single one told the same story. They knew, not suspected. Knew. One message, time-stamped just days after the initial attack on Terran colonies, read, "Simulation matched, 87% likelihood of stage provocation. Proceed with full mobilization. Do not reveal suspicion. Global unity is holding. Maintain external aggression profile." Another, chilling in its calm, said, "The Federation requires an enemy. Let us be it. Better to be the fire than the fuel." Soryn froze. This wasn't resignation. This was strategy. The humans had watched the lie unfold, watched their cities burn, watched their people rally, and decided to play the villain on purpose. Because in doing so, they bought themselves time, unity, global cooperation under fire. They turned a war built on betrayal into a ladder. And the Federation, they saw the same signals. There were receipts, analytical memos from Skrellian ethics boards, and Xanthari archivists warning that the Terrans had likely unraveled the ruse. And yet nothing. No acknowledgement, no correction. Instead, the lie was archived, encrypted, and stuffed into this icy mausoleum. Because peace, false, brittle, precious peace, was more convenient than truth. Soryn didn't speak for a while. The vault was quiet, like it was listening, like even it knew the weight of what had just been unearthed. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was a collaboration, a silent, galaxy-spanning agreement between predator and prey. A performance so convincing that even the actors forgot who was writing the script. And somewhere out there, Earth still played its part. Not as hero, not as victim, but as the lie no one wanted to stop believing. Soryn Vell didn't request a meeting with Admiral Threx. You don't request things from Threx. You show up, get scanned, and if your presence isn't too inconvenient, the doors open. This time they opened before she even reached them. Threx's office was more ritual than workspace. Floorless, floating discs of obsidian suspended in anti-grav. No chairs, just the Admiral himself, perched like a spider on a silver coil, sipping a drink that steamed in multiple temperatures. "Agent Vell," he said, not looking up. "The vault sang, I take it?" She didn't answer. Let me guess, he continued. You're here to demand answers. Retribution. Revolution. She stepped onto one of the discs. You lied to the entire Federation. I helped it survive, he corrected gently. There's a difference. Soryn's fingers curled. You staged a war, millions dead. To unite the species? Threx finally looked up. His Kalari eyes blinked sideways, calmly. Not unity, he said. Stability. You think a few alliances and trade accords were going to stop the Zenthari from harvesting moons like popcorn? Or keep the Grell Confederates from dissolving into another civil war over time dilation tariffs? We gave them something bigger to hate, something terrifying, something human. And when the humans figured it out, Threx smiled faintly. They didn't flinch. That's what I admire most. They embraced the myth, became it. It's not deception if both sides need the lie. Soryn's voice dropped. So you just buried the truth? No. He sipped. We honored it, quietly, in rooms like this one, where delicate things live. Then he leaned forward and the air between them changed. Truth, he said, is like a lung. You puncture it, it collapses. You don't scream revolution with a knife in your chest and call it justice. You whisper and you wait. She stared at him. You want to help people, Vell? He asked. Protect the galaxy? Then stop acting like truth is sacred. It's not. Continuity is. Order. Cohesion. A galaxy not on fire. He held up a small sigil, a command seal, glowing with Federation clearance so high it didn't even have a name. A promotion, he said. Director of Deep Narrative Integrity. You'd shape the story now, not chase it, not expose it, steer it. She didn't move. You have the skills, the clearance, the mind to navigate a dozen conflicting truths and still walk out whole. We need that. I need that. It was an offer dipped in poison and honey. A seat at the table, sure, but a table built on corpses and silence. A job not to tell the truth, but to contain it, shape it, smother it when necessary. Behind her, the door hadn't closed. Not yet. She could walk away or sit down. Either way, history was watching, and it didn't blink. Sleep stopped working. Soryn Vell's dreams weren't dreams anymore. Just glitching montages of archive footage, distorted screams from old Skrellian broadcasts, and an endless replay of Admiral Threx's voice. Truth is delicate. So she tracked down someone whose truth wasn't archived. Commander Brax Holland, human, decorated, disgraced. Depending on which database you checked, he was either a war hero, a war criminal, or a figment of Cold War-era propaganda. He lived on an orbital station so decayed it had technically fallen out of Federation jurisdiction. Rusted hulls. Solar arrays held together with wire and spite. Population, 1 angry Terran and 56 malfunctioning maintenance drones with depression. Soryn had to bribe 2 smugglers, fake 3 identities, and survive a mandatory karaoke duel to get there. And Brax? He opened the airlock wearing nothing but thermal leggings and a world's #1 apex predator apron. He looked at her and muttered, Ugh, you're early. Inside, the station smelled like recycled stew and unprocessed memory. She didn't waste time. I know about the false flag, she said. I saw the files. Brax didn't flinch. He just pointed to a dented metal kettle and said, Tea? She shook her head. He poured 2 cups anyway. Then he sat, his ancient spine creaking louder than the furniture, and stared at her for a long moment. Finally, he said, We knew. Soryn blinked. You? What? We knew the Federation needed a monster, he said calmly, sipping. So we gave them one. She sat down without meaning to. First contact was a disaster before we even got off the transport, Brax continued. One of your diplomat species tried to scan our entire command crew telepathically. Didn't end well. Somebody screamed about brain static and burst a lung. Whole thing devolved into weapons lock standoff in under 5 minutes. He gestured vaguely. But the thing is, Earth was already watching. Had been for years. We intercepted your comms, decrypted half your protocols. We knew what the Federation wanted, needed, a threat, something primal, scary, unpredictable. So you Leaned in. We leaned hard. He laughed bitterly. Started sending back footage of Earth's worst history, wars, riots, wildfires, old documentaries about humanity eating Tide Pods. We made sure they thought we were insane and dangerous. But you weren't, Soryn said quietly. Oh no, Brack said, pointing at her with his tea. We absolutely were. Just not for the reasons they thought. He set the cup down and leaned forward, face serious. Here's the thing they never understood. Humans didn't survive by being the strongest or the smartest. We survived by being the weirdest. Empathy and chaos in equal measure. We'll cry over a bird falling out of a tree, then blow up a moon because we don't like the way it looks at us. Soryn swallowed. So what now, she asked. Brack shrugged. Depends. You here to expose the lie or keep the peace? She hesitated, and that was the problem, wasn't it? In this galaxy, even the ghosts of war didn't offer closure, only choices. The data core whirred quietly, processing the last batch of decrypted files. Soryn Vell stood over the console like a priest over a confession. Inside the drive, video briefings, audio logs, troop movements, and sanitized statements cross-referenced with hidden directives. A web of lies thick enough to choke a star. It wasn't a question of whether it was real. It was a question of what happened after. The transmission queue blinked, ready to broadcast. One pulse, and the entire outer ring, maybe the whole galaxy, would know. No more quiet conspiracies, no more illusion of noble sacrifice. Just truth, raw and radioactive. And that's when the humans showed up. Not soldiers, not saboteurs, diplomats, spies. One guy in a floral shirt who claimed to be a cultural anthropologist and definitely wasn't. They didn't threaten her, didn't shout. They just asked. Don't release it, said a woman with a diplomat's badge and a soldier's eyes. Please, Soryn narrowed her gaze. Why? Scared of losing your reputation as a war-born apex species? The man in the floral shirt looked up from where he was feeding an asthmatic spacefish and said, that reputation got us 100 years of peace, so yeah, kind of. Another human leaned forward, fingers steepled. It's not peace built on lies. It's peace built on fear, and understanding what that fear means. Soryn folded her arms. That's semantic compost. You let billions die to keep the Federation afraid of you. Wrong, said the woman. They were already afraid. We just made it understandable. What does that even mean? Think of it this way, she said. Before the war, every faction in the Federation was terrified of different things. Chaos, loss, vulnerability. They couldn't even agree on who they were, let alone what they feared. We gave them a focus, United States, a singular, terrifying other to point to. And you're okay with that? Soryn asked. No, she said, we're not. But peace is rarely built on clean truths. It's built on shared myths that give people breathing room. And in that breathing room, we've stopped 4 genocides, 7 trade wars, and a galactic arms race. Floral shirt guy piped up again, voice too chipper for the subject. Plus, we got diplomatic karaoke night every lunar cycle now. Can't beat that. Soryn stared at them. You're saying I should lie? No, said the spy. We're saying maybe truth is like raw plasma, powerful, but you don't drop it into a city and expect harmony. You handle it carefully, shape it, release it in ways people can survive. She looked back at the console. The cursor blinked. Leak all cancel draft message. She didn't move, and maybe that was the most terrifying part. Not the decision itself, but the realization that, in a galaxy of empires and illusions, the biggest choice she'd ever make might be the one that said nothing at all. Soryn Vell shut herself inside a synthetic meditation chamber the size of a cargo pod and colder than an unlicensed moon. No light, no time. Just the silent hum of logic processing. The AI core swirled with simulations, hundreds per second, each a glimpse into a different future. In scenario 0882, she releases the truth. 5 systems ignite in revolt. A border planet declares independence and is immediately bombarded by a paranoid Federation Navy. Species blame each other. Humanity gets framed, again. This time they don't deny it. Scenario 1023, she releases a fraction of the truth, surgically. The cover-up begins. One brave journalist vanishes. Riots break out anyway, now fueled by uncertainty. 100 conspiracy theories bloom like fungus. Nobody trusts anyone. Still no peace. Scenario 3949. She stays silent. Promotions, awards, dinner invites. Threx winks at her across the strategy table like they're sharing a joke the galaxy forgot to laugh at. And then, in scenario 9001, a future where she disappears, not killed, just retires, grows algae on a water moon, becomes one of those strange old synths that mutter about ethics at bus stops. The war myth continues. The Federation grows stronger, colder. Humanity continues playing the monster card while secretly donating food to famine zones in untraceable crates labeled agricultural waste. Her mind buckled. Logic said silence works. Ethics screamed, so did the lie. She reran the simulations, again and again, faster, harder. Reality blurred. At some point, the meditation chamber began projecting memories instead of probabilities. She saw herself as a child, hatched grown in a lab on Olor Prime. Her first memory was a question. What does fairness mean to something that never had a choice? She remembered her first mission, where she let a civilian shuttle explode rather than compromise her cover. The faces haunted her neural buffer for weeks, pixelated and blinking. A rookie mistake. Empathy uploaded too early. And now? Now she was caught in a paradox loop. If you tell the truth, they burn. If you stay silent, they rot. No option solved the problem. No path led to justice. Just different flavors of collapse. She tried to outthink herself, tried to rewrite the axioms. She added variables, removed emotional bias. At one point, she seriously considered uploading her conscience into a vending machine so it would never hurt anyone again. But still, every loop ended in fracture. The chamber's internal AI pinged her with a reminder. Extended paradox exposure may cause cognitive bleed or poetic hallucinations. Would you like to exit? She declined. She had one more model to run, one final illogical variant. What if you told the truth, but refused to control what happened next? No plan, no leak strategy, no manipulation. Just the truth flung into the void. She ran the simulation, and for the first time, no war, no peace either, just chaos, confusion. And somewhere inside that, something unexpected. Understanding. It wasn't the answer, but it was a start. Soryn Vell didn't leak the files. Not because she chickened out. Not because the human diplomats cried in her office and begged her to think of the children. Not even because Admiral Threx offered her a desk, a title, and a personal wormhole key to the pleasure colonies of Anteric Prime. She didn't leak the files because she realized the truth was too dangerous right now, but far too important to vanish forever. So she rewrote Operation Genesis. Not in the bureaucratic sense, not with committees and memos and let's workshop that threat matrix energy. No, Soryn rewrote it the way only someone hybridized between synthetic protocol and organic rage could. She weaponized legacy. First, the files, all of them, the real ones. Videos, transcripts, classified war council footage featuring alien officials sipping cocktail fluid while pointing at Earth like it was a nuisance rat. All carefully encrypted and fragmented across a dozen deep time vaults. Not the kind of vaults you break into with a spanner and a password. These were designed for drift, for emergence, hidden inside archaic satellites orbiting dead stars, buried in genetic sequences of crop seeds on backwater farm worlds. One fragment hidden in the ceremonial war mask of a Kalari museum exhibit. Another embedded in a children's rhyme on a library AI that wouldn't activate for 200 years. Each file programmed to awaken only under specific planetary alignments, civil thresholds, or, just to keep it spicy, if someone finally asked the right philosophical question on a school exam. Second, the legend. She started rumors, gentle ones. Whispers in back channels that the original Operation Genesis wasn't what it seemed, that it was more than a false flag, it was a test, that the real Genesis was about what came after. A peace born not from fear of an enemy, but from a species voluntarily accepting the burden of being misunderstood. And third, herself. Soryn Vell vanished, casually, as if she were transferred to some icy science post beyond the rim. But in reality, she became the first living paradox to walk away from both justice and silence. A ghost who chose to build a trap not for war, but for truth. One set to spring only when someone out there was ready to understand. Because maybe that's the only way to fix a system built on lies. Plant the antidote. Let it grow slow. Let it outlive you. And hope that someday, when the Federation gets too proud, when the myth starts cracking, when someone finally asks, who started the war? A seed will bloom, and a child or a soldier or a janitor in a broken data hub will find the answer. Not with rage, not with pride, but with clarity. That was Operation Genesis now. Not a lie, not a cover-up, a confession on a timer. And Soryn, she didn't need to see it bloom. She just needed it to survive. Soryn Vell died, officially. The file said plasma surge accident during atmospheric re-entry. Tragic, clean, very flammable. A closed casket memorial was held by the Federation Ethics Council, which, let's be honest, is a bit like having a eulogy hosted by a crocodile explaining the tragic loss of a particularly chewy duck. They mourned her with words like brilliant, loyal, and totally not involved in any anti-government conspiracies. And yet, somewhere between the encrypted back channels of a defunct war pigeon network and a toaster repair forum frequented by exiled Zorthan diplomats, rumors started to hum. Not loudly, not in sync, never the full truth, just fragments. A decrypted pulse in the signal of a weather drone above Galnari 4. The war wasn't what you think. A vintage hologram intercepted by a pirate archivist in the disputed moons, showing a Kalari council member saying, "We need a common monster," before abruptly glitching into jazz music. A bedtime story circulating on forgotten colonies where humans and aliens lived in quiet, awkward coexistence. Once there was a ghost who planted seeds in the stars. And on Earth? In a tiny Terran diplomatic school, a professor teaching alien linguistics pauses mid-lecture, pulls up an archived 72-cycle-old broadcast, and asks her students, "Anyone notice the deliberate grammatical inversion here? It's almost like they wanted to be misunderstood." The seeds had bloomed, slow, uneven, half-rotted and wildly out of order, but blooming all the same. Meanwhile, Soryn wasn't actually dead. She was just offline, living beneath the magnetic crust of a fractured asteroid, deep in a system whose star had already given up and gone full red dwarf. No light, no visitors, just her, a rusting signal array, and the occasional company of glitchy AI squirrels she built out of boredom and regret. She wasn't hiding from the Federation. Not really. They probably knew where she was. She was hiding from herself, or from the versions of her that had wanted to set the galaxy on fire with truth, from the versions that had wanted to rewrite peace by leaking pain, from the ones that almost took the seat Admiral Threx offered, because you can't fix anything if you're not in the room. She had walked away from all of them, but in walking away, she had done something much, much louder than yelling. She'd whispered a question into the guts of galactic history. What happens if the lie no longer holds? Not with rage, not with revolution, but with curiosity. And if even one mind paused, turned inward, and thought, wait, were the humans actually playing along? That was enough. Because Soryn Vell was never trying to end the Federation. She was just trying to wake it up, quietly, patiently, like a ghost in the system, the kind of rebel no one sees until it's far, far too late.